We do have Tony's very important top 19 quarterbacks to get to. We will at some point. But yesterday on the show, you may have heard us talking about the Michigan State horror, the latest in what seem like daily horrors in our country involving gun violence. And we went and got a Pulitzer Prize winner, John Woodrow Cox. He's an enterprise reporter for the Washington Post. He's also written the book, Children Under Fire, An American Crisis. It's based on a series the Post did about gun violence and the impact on kids. It was also a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. He won it for January 6th reporting. John, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your work and your expertise. When you say the impact of gun violence on our kids, when I was a kid, the danger was guns and video games. And now I'm seeing Missouri gun laws with minors that are appalling to me and scary. So tell me, what is, and thank you for joining us, what would you say has been the impact of gun violence on our kids?
Yeah, I mean, it's enormous. It's hard to quantify, even really. You know, we tend to think of the impact pretty narrowly. I think even people who are engaged on the issue, they think of it in terms of how many died, right? So when you think of a mass shooting or a school shooting, you think of it in terms of the number dead. So think about Parkland, which, you know, the 5-year anniversary was yesterday. The number that comes to most people's minds is 17. When they think of Uvalde, they think of 21 because that's how many people died there. When they think of Sandy Hook, they think of 26. Those numbers don't begin to capture the scope of this crisis. So when we just limit it to school shootings or those types of events, we've tracked since Columbine how many children have been on a campus when a school shooting occurred, and that number is now nearly 340,000 kids who've been on a campus when somebody showed up with a gun and started shooting. And we know the reason we track that is because early in my reporting on this subject, I realized that there were kids who were not harmed, who were not always even present, and their lives had been completely derailed. They were, could never go back to school. They were going through years of therapy. They were on antidepressants and antipsychotics. They were self-harming. You know, these were kids, again, who were not legally considered victims of anything. And that is just when we think about school shootings. So when we think about the sort of community violence that happens in places like Southeast DC and Philadelphia and Chicago, it's so much broader. And, I'll quickly cite one study that I think perfectly illustrates this point. Kids in Chicago, they did this study. It found that children who lived in a neighborhood where a homicide occurred, 1 week later, they did worse on their test scores. So they didn't have to know the person. They didn't have to hear the shooting. They didn't have to see it. They just had to know someone in my neighborhood was shot to death. And a week later, it affected them so profoundly that they did worse on their test scores. So, a lot of my work has been about trying to open people's eyes to the scope of this problem. It is not 17 and 26 and yesterday 3, right? Or Monday 3 in Michigan State. It is literally millions of children in this country are affected by gun violence every year. It is an epidemic.
Why is it that we're the only country that has this epidemic?
Well, we have in excess of 400 million guns, and we have laws that do a poor job at keeping them out of the hands of dangerous people. I mean, it is that simple. There's the other alternative to that is that Americans are uniquely evil. It's one or the other. There isn't another answer for this. We're either uniquely evil people, because if you look at places like England and Canada and Germany and every other developed country in the world, these sorts of things don't happen. And if you look at the difference between us and them, the most obvious is that we have more guns than people, and we really struggle at regulating those firearms from falling into the hands of the wrong people.
Is that also the answer to why it is we can't bridge the gulf of distance between survivors and politicians here?
I think that money plays a huge part in that, frankly. It's, most gun owners want stricter gun laws. Most Americans, overwhelmingly Americans, want stricter gun laws, sort of the things that are people often describe as common sense gun laws. The polls consistently show gun owners, even NRA members, want stricter gun laws, want children not to have access to firearms. But gun manufacturers, lobbyists, they oppose any sort of regulations. And the truth is that there's a handful of Americans in the U.S. Senate who are deciding, and now the House, because the GOP has control of the House again. There's a handful of Americans who are deciding the gun laws for everybody. And their votes do not represent what most Americans want. They represent often what lobbyists want. And there's a real fear, and it's a legitimate fear, that if they oppose any sort of gun rights law, or if they support a gun control law or gun safety law, that they're going to be voted out. And there's a track record of that, because they're labeled as gun grabbers. The term I heard for a long time was an Obama-loving gun grabber. And they would get primaried by another Republican who's to the right of them, and they would lose office. And that is what's preventing a whole lot of people, certainly in Congress, from supporting reform.
Is that what's happening in Missouri with gun laws and minors and the refusal to put a ban on children carrying guns in public?
I mean, I would have to get up to speed on exactly what the debate is specifically in Missouri, but that is almost universally what happens, right? So when we talk about safe storage laws, children not having access to firearms, fewer than half the states in America have any sort of law that mandates that gun owners keep their guns out of the hands of children. 23 states in the district, that's it, right? So, and universally, that's not because most constituents are opposed to those laws. It's because those politicians, certainly typically GOP politicians, do not want to be labeled as anti-gun. And that is what they will be labeled if they support sort of even the most menial regulations.
John, is there any reason for the public to hope or believe that this problem will go away?
Yes, there is. This can feel hopeless. Well, I'll caveat. This problem will not go away. In our lifetimes, we will never go from 40,000 plus dead of guns every year to zero. It won't happen. Not in the history of this country. It won't happen because, those 400 million guns are already on the street, right? They're already out there. But that can't be the goal, right? We look at this in such a binary way. We look at it as either it's a disaster or it goes away. And the goal should be reducing that number of 40,000 plus to 30 or 25 or 20. And that is attainable. That is actually something that we could achieve. So one statistic I cite from my own research, there's a lot of Americans that the only form of gun violence they care about is school shootings. That's it. That's the only thing. They don't care about black and brown children being shot to death in their own neighborhoods. They don't care about children finding guns and killing themselves with them. But they do care about school shootings. What I tell those people is if children did not have access to guns, more than half the school shootings in this country would end overnight. If that's the only thing we changed, if gun owners just secured their weapons, then overnight we could end more than half of school shootings, just like that.
You've spent time with these kids, a lot of time with these kids. I would imagine the happiness in your life has been drained from reporting on this story, that this has been something that you cannot help but absorb.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, I've immersed myself in the subject for a long time. I spent all summer in Uvalde following a 10-year-old survivor of that shooting. It is something that takes a personal toll, certainly, but, it's also a privilege. And I sort of look at that as in this season of my career, I'm able to do this work. And these kids have been voiceless for so long. I mean, even journalists pretty consistently do a poor job at telling stories from the perspectives of children rather than all the adults around them. So that's really been the focus of my work for a long time, is to give these kids voice and to understand them as fully formed human beings. It does take a toll, but at the same time, I wouldn't trade it. I mean, it really is a privilege and an honor for those families to say yes, for those kids to say, yeah, you can come into our lives and tell our story.
What do you feel like you've learned?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. You know, I think it is not hopeless. It is not hopeless, but it is hopeless if we do nothing, right? If we don't actually make incremental progress, which is what this will require, right? It requires incremental progress. And we can't get complacent. It is so easy to not engage with this subject, or to only engage with it when there's a shooting in Michigan State and in the 2 or 3 days afterwards. This is a chronic problem that requires a lot of emotional energy from everybody, right? Not just those of us who are reporting on it. I think too that I would reiterate this idea that we've got to get a handle on the scope of this problem. We cannot limit our understanding of a shooting like Uvalde to 21. I mean, I interviewed a little boy named Jaden who hid under a table in one of those classrooms in Uvalde, and there was a black cloth over this table, and he watched his teachers and his friends be executed in his classroom. And, you know, he described the blood on the floor like Jell-O, and he saw his cousin in the hallway with a bullet wound in his head. And he's not legally considered a victim of anything. Jaden is not considered a victim of anything. He is not being afforded weekly mental health care for free. He's not, you know, he doesn't have a GoFundMe that's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is a kid who, he and his family, you know, live in public housing, and they're really on their own, right? And I don't think people understand that. I think people think that, oh, when a kid goes through like this, the wealthiest country in the world is going to step up and support them. And that is not how it works. So I think that is the thing I constantly preach, is we've got to stop viewing this as a thing that is just the people who get shot, just the people who are killed. It is a problem so much bigger than that.
I understand what you're saying about incremental progress, needing the community and people to care. But when you say there is hope and it can end, what proof do you have of that, given that numerically, I think I can say this, the problem is worse than it's ever been, correct? Last year was the worst year that this country has ever had in terms of this kind of gun violence.
Right. So the long-term hope. So when I talk about sort of short-term hope and progress, it's that incremental change, right? That's where we need people to lock up their firearms, right? This is a sort of a short-term solution. I am of the mind, I'm convinced that this generation who has grown up with lockdowns, lockdown drills, who are native to this, we call them the Columbine generation or the lockdown generation, that they will not allow their children to endure what they endured. Now, that sort of sweeping change that I think that generation will lead could take 20 years. It could take that long. But the people in power right now, the people making these decisions, are 2 or 3 steps removed from what those kids have dealt with every day, year after year after year. And, there's a lot of discussion, always a lot of debate about lockdown drills. But we did an analysis of one school year and found that more than 4 million children went through an actual lockdown where they hid in their classrooms. They thought they might be shot to death in their schools. So a lot of people will say, well, school shootings are rare. The product of school shootings, the consequences of school shootings, things like lockdowns where children hide in a corner and text their parents goodbye, those things are not rare. And I am convinced that when those children are adults, when they have children of their own, that they're not going to tolerate a society that allows this to keep happening. And I think that at that point is when we'll see sweeping federal change.
Your book has a number of numbers that are really jarring. 1 child is shot every hour in America.
Yeah.
30,000 kids and teens have been killed by gunfire in the last decade. It's the second leading cause of children's death behind cancer. And of the world's high-income countries, 91% of kids younger than 15 who were killed by gunfire lived here in America. What do you view as the most damning numbers in your book?
Well, a perfect illustration is since I wrote the book, gun violence is now the leading cause of children and teens in this country. It's surpassed every other cause. So, that's happened in a matter of a couple of years. The statistics that I mean, you can sort of pick any of those out of a hat, right? But anytime you compare our country to any other, that's where it is so damning in my mind, right? That it's dozens of times worse here. It's dozens of times more dangerous for kids here when it comes to firearms. And it doesn't have to be that way, right? We're making a choice as a country day after day. We're making a decision because it's if it was an unsolvable problem, then every other country would be dealing with it, right? But it's not. It is uniquely American. So I think, any kind of statistic that compares us with any other developed nation, those are the ones that really stick with me.
John, do red flag laws work? Because there were signs all over social media with this most recent shooting at Michigan State. Do they work?
There is some research that indicates that they work. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that it works. One of the problems we have around this issue is we have so little research to tell us what does and doesn't work.
Right.
And that is by design. I get into this in my book, but in the mid 1990s, a congressman from Arkansas, his name is Jay Dickey, stood up in front of Congress and said that, basically the CDC shouldn't be promoting gun control. So there was an amendment placed in the budget that became known as the Dickey Amendment that basically prohibited the CDC from studying gun violence at all, from studying guns, period. So we went 25 plus years in this country without the entity that researches diseases and crises from researching guns at all. The last few years, that dam finally broke, and there's some money that's gone back into it. In fact, Jay Dickey spent the last decade of his life trying to campaign against his own amendment. He realized that he'd made a huge mistake. But what that resulted in was a real lack of understanding, right, of what works and what doesn't work. We have lots of anecdotal evidence. We do have, evidence that things like child access laws, that those actually reduce the number of deaths. But there's so much that we just don't know. It would be as if early in the pandemic, somebody had stood up and said, well, I don't really like the politics around the research going into vaccines, so we're going to end the production of vaccines. We're just going to stop trying to figure out what stops this epidemic. It was the same thing in the mid 1990s, at the middle of, the crack epidemic, when people were getting shot, astronomically high rates. We just stopped researching it entirely. So we're decades behind. And the analogy that I often use is, and that in fact changed Jay Dickey's mind, was car safety. The reason we have seatbelts, the reason we have airbags, the reason that there are, cement medians on roads are all because of research, because they realized if we do this, we'll save X number of lives. We could do that exact same thing with firearms. We could figure out things that wouldn't deprive law-abiding gun owners of owning weapons or buying weapons, but would save thousands of lives.
The name of the book, Children Under Fire, An American Crisis. He's doing important work. John, thank you, sir, for being on with us, sharing your expertise.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks again, John. That was tremendous.
Yeah, thanks for the thoughtful questions, too. Those were great questions. I seldom get questions that good, so thank you.
Thank you.
We'll leave that part in, too.
We seldom ask questions that are any good. Ask the fans of Tua.
Well, I'm a longtime listener and viewer, so I appreciate coming on.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. We
your
appreciate
time.
it.
All right, take care.
I was going to not even pause and just go straight to Tony's top 19.
I believe also Roy has a top 5 scapegoats.
Wow.
We can make the transition seem seamless. So whenever you're ready.
No. Well, I want to hear how he would do that.
No, we'll put a commercial break here. So
No one's under fire more than Tony in the shipping container. And now.
that was really good.
He was good.
We've got a top 19 list of Tonys to get to. We also, and this is rare, Roy has a top 5 list out of nowhere on scapegoats. But before we get to either of those things, I need to understand a little better what is going on with Stugotz, because
What do you mean?
I'm confused on a couple of fronts by you saying the Eagles are the rare Super Bowl team that lost, but it feels like they won.
Right.
And furthermore, you are insane the last few days about stop telling me that the Chiefs are a dynasty. You're really getting mad about this. And this is the rare circumstance where it seems like Stugotz is not willing to allow the winner to be the winner. He doesn't want the winner to be the winner. And it's making me wonder, like, did you put a bet on Philadelphia? Did you say
did,
somewhere
yeah.
that Philadelphia was going to win and be great and you feel like they were denied you being right?
I was right on half the radio stations in America. I did Radio Row last week. I told half of them Philadelphia was going to win. The other half Kansas City was going to win. So I'm good there. I did place a bet. I lost money. I had the Eagles. Okay. But that has nothing to do with my take. First off, the Eagles, there is no scapegoat. The scapegoat is the referee. The Eagles played a very good football game. The Chiefs just happened to have the ball last. I know the Eagles did, but they had 8 seconds. So there really is no scapegoat. Jalen Hurts was everything we want Jalen Hurts to be, and then some. He was that good in that game, right? So he wasn't a loser, even though he lost the game.
Do the Eagles?
No one's blaming Jalen Hurts today.
Does Jalen Hurts have a Super Bowl championship in your personal record book?
He doesn't. But you know what the Chiefs don't have in my personal record book? A dynasty. They just don't have, Dan, that's not a dynasty. You can't have championships separated by, I think, 4 or 5 years. Only have 2 of them. Here's a dynasty.
Only 2 of them.
2 and 5 years. Not a dynasty. Here's a dynasty. The Bulls, 6 and 8 years. The Cowboys, 3 and 4 years. The Niners, I think it was 4 in a decade. That is the Islanders. They won 4 consecutive Stanley Cups, made it to 5. Let's not do this with the Chiefs, where they're on some sort of historic run where we're calling them a dynasty. It's not. You can't have championships separated by 5 years. And you can't go to 5 AFC championship games, have 2 wins, 1 loss, not make it to the Super Bowl 2 times. Not a dynasty. It's not a dynasty.
It's why he's so good, man.
Yeah.
It's a great take. Who else is saying it?
Nobody.
Well, I don't think it's a great take. And the reason I don't think it's a great take, it's not even that he's wrong.
Well,
It's
right.
just how tired I am of people jumping to call someone a dynasty, and then the people that react with utter indignance about that's not a dynasty yet. You got to win 1 more or 2 more. You got to win them in this span. I'm not interested in that argument. I'm interested in the roots of why Stugotz is doing this. The loser lost, and Stugotz is insisting on making them the winner. The winner won, and Stugotz is insisting on taking things away from them. And I just don't know why it's happening, because Stugotz usually allows the winners to be the winners, except for Kevin Durant, when he doesn't actually have 2 titles because of how he won the 2 titles.
I'm acknowledging that the Chiefs won a Super Bowl. They won a Super Bowl. It's their 2nd Super Bowl, or Patrick Mahomes' and Travis Kelce's 2nd Super Bowl. This is not a dynasty. That's all I'm saying. I'm not trying to take anything away. I'm trying to take a dynasty away from the Chiefs.
Dynasty away from
but
them.
I don't even think the Chiefs would call it a dynasty.
Dan, would you? Say it. Yay or nay?
It's not a dynasty.
Yay or nay?
I don't care.
You know a dynasty
Then
when
no.
you see it, Dan. You don't have to think about
Say
it.
no.
All right?
I think that the terms for greatness have been so altered by some of the modern people doing the greatnessing, whether it's LeBron or Tom Brady or Serena Williams, that now the standard is the Patriots. The Patriots in our lifetime won all the championships. We're always there. And so that's the standard for dynasty. And compared to that, everyone pales. Everyone fails compared to that.
But also, the Patriots did that over 18 years. The Spurs did that over 19 years. The story is not written yet, but in order to have Stugotz get angry and debate something, we have to put it in some kind of framing like, is this a dynasty? Because if you just say, are the Chiefs really good? The answer is yes, but are they a dynasty? Then we can debate.
Well, but it's not a debate. Are they historically great? Yeah, we expect them to keep winning.
We expect them to keep winning.
Well, they may not.
I expected Dan Marino to make it to more Super Bowls. He didn't.
Okay, but Stugotz, you also expected Andy Reid to not replace Alex Smith with Patrick Mahomes. It is looking, after they won the first one, a bunch of their players, Chris Jones, Tyreek Hill, they kept saying loudly, we can win 6 or 7 or 8. And now we're all saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can.
Right.
Because the minimum standard since Patrick Mahomes has been the quarterback of the Chiefs is they get to the conference championship game.
Not 4, not 5.
That's the minimum. That's the start. The season begins at the conference championship game for them.
When you think sports dynasties, you think of UCLA, you think of UConn women's basketball, you think of the Yankees, you think of the Edmonton Oilers, you think of the Islanders, you think of the Patriots from 2000.
But Dynasties.com?
No one is. No one in 10 years.
now.
No, if they win 3 or 4 more Super Bowls 10 years from now, we'll say they're a dynasty. They won't do that, by the way. But if they do, I'll give them dynasty.
But this is what's happening with
But
Stugotz.
no one right now is thinking, no one in Philadelphia, New York, or Boston, where they're still doing topics like this, is someone doing best sports dynasties of all time and saying, hey, Kansas City Chiefs. Nobody. Not a single person. And if they are, they should be fired.
I agree
seriously.
with Stugotz.
Thank you.
Too soon.
Do you call the Giants of the mid-2000s a dynasty? San Francisco Giants in baseball.
How many in how many years?
They won every other.
They won 3 and 5.
3 and 5, never back to back, right?
It's kind of in that same realm of they had a solid 6-year stretch, but no one really thinks that. I'm not saying they're in that, but that's kind of what you're saying.
But
doing your
3
take
and
for
5,
you.
no back to backs. I feel like a dynasty needs at least one back to back somewhere in there.
No, back to back
do.
is so hard. I'm thinking now like the Blackhawks in the 2010s because they won 3 in 6 years also.
Yeah,
I mean,
not
2009
a
to 2015.
The beauty
but
of
no back to back is extremely hard. It's only happened in hockey like 4 times.
That's why it's a selective club.
Yeah, but the Islanders won 4 straight. I think the Oilers won 4 or 5 straight, right, Roy? Something like that?
Yeah.
Right after the Islanders won
4
theirs,
straight,
right?
yeah.
You had back-to-back dynasties.
What about the Tampa Bay Lightning currently?
Yes.
back-to-backs?
Yes, the
Just
Tampa Bay
like a good
Lightning.
I think it's more just like a stretch, a 5-year
If
stretch
the
where you're in it
dominant
every
team
year.
of your time. This is the beauty of the Stugotz creature. He's making you remember the take 7 years from now when he's wrong. In 7 years of games that haven't been played. It's how he always wins. He can just say they're not going to do it now and dare someone to remember 7 years from now.
That I said
Hey, remember that time that you said that they weren't going to be a dynasty? Stugotz wouldn't have said after Tom Brady beat the greatest show on turf, the Rams, in one of the great upsets in sports history to win his first championship, that will be a dynasty. No one can predict that. However, the Kansas City Chiefs have an ingredient that make it easier to predict than most.
Ooh, are the current Georgia Bulldogs a dynasty?
Back-to-backs?
Alabama's a dynasty still.
Alabama was a dynasty.
But now it's Georgia.
But if they're back next year in the championship game, they're still a dynasty.
Georgia has just won back-to-backs. Now, if they win one of the next 2, 3, and 4 years, I'll give them dynasty. I will. The Steelers won 4 and 6 years, back-to-back twice, I believe.
Yes.
That's a dynasty.
Steel curtain.
That's a dynasty.
This is
4
what
and
you're
6
doing.
years.
So let's just get the formal definition so that we never have to have this conversation again.
Right.
What is the Stugotz formal definition for dynasty? It is multiple championships within 5 years,
Right.
at least 2, maybe 3, and they have to be back-to-back.
There has to be back-to-backs, minimum 4 championships
that's so
in
hard
like
in
a
the NFL.
7-year
So there's
span.
3
Back-to-back in the
dynasties
NFL?
ever.
Pretty much, yeah.
The wiki criteria for this, it says, in sports, a dynasty is a team or individual that dominates their sport or league for an extended length of time. Some leagues usually maintain official lists of dynasties, often as a part of a Hall of Fame. This can result in a frequent topic of debate among sports fans due to a lack of consensus and agreement in the many different variables and criteria that fans may use to define a sports dynasty, thus making it great Stugotz conversational fodder.
I mean, the 20s Yankees won 7 from 1920 to 33. They won 7 of 13 World Series, 4 in a row. I mean, that's a dynasty. That's a dynasty. What the Chiefs are doing right now, not a dynasty. They're close, but not a dynasty. Sorry.
Do white people have a dynasty?
Yes.
One of the great dynasties of all time.
The best.
More of a supremacy, actually.
John Forsyth.
Time now. What?
Huh?
Time now for Roy's top 5 scapegoats.
Carrington's, I thought you were talking about.
Stugotz referencing a 1979
It was a
television
great show.
show.
It really was. Linda Evans.
Roy, number 5. I love the faces that Jessica makes.
Whatever show it is, Roy's seen every episode.
Yeah, mostly.
It's called Dynasty.
Consumed-
Dynasty.
Okay. Consumed a lot of TV, I've learned.
Number 5, Roy.
Zinedine Zidane.
Great show.
Yeah.
Good
Great
stuff.
show.
Yeah.
Back-to-back Z's in that name, too.
Couple of Z's, cutting it up.
Number 4.
Grady Little.
Good one.
Is Zidane more of a goat than Baggio?
That's actually a really good call, because Baggio skied the winning penalty in the '94 World Cup final. I think Zidane is just because it was such a moment of complete lapse in judgment. Like, what are you doing, man? And like Baggio just missed a penalty. Zidane lost his head and headbutted a dude in the chest in the biggest sporting event in the world.
What a moment that was.
While the game was tied at 1.
Yes.
He was red carded.
Although I believe the Italians went on to win on penalties, right?
Yeah,
So
yes.
In theory, France still had a level playing field after that.
Number 3.
New York Football Giants head coach John McVay.
I'm not even remembering
What?
the details.
He
there.
decided to run a running play instead of a kneel down, and then him and Edwards took it back for a touchdown.
That is a stunner to have in your top 5 there.
How is that top 5 if no one else in the room knew what you were even talking about?
It's a bad number 3.
That game only meant
kneel down.
It's
it
a
only
kneel
meant
down.
something to one team, though. I mean,
Well, it's his fault. So
right.
I think that was that Pasarczyk
Pasarczyk, yeah.
handing the ball to Zonka or trying to hand the ball
yes,
to
Zonka was the fullback. Yes,
Roy is secretly an NFL Films head.
yeah.
I remember when we worked at the radio station, he walked in one day and he had a leather-bound book.
No, Roy's just old.
No, but
No.
also loves NFL. He walked in with a leather-bound book of all of the NFL Films music on CDs.
That's right.
Like
That's right.
it was a 15-set volume of NFL Films music on CDs.
CDs, I rest my case.
Can we make a top 5 list of things here that strangest things anyone around here has seen Roy do? Or I'd like to make a top 5
Meaning
list.
a leather-bound NFL Films music book.
That would be
Quite
such a
something.
great number 5.
Quite something.
It would be. Number 2, Roy.
Edmonton Oilers defenseman Steve Smith.
Having a clue what you're talking about.
Well, he had an own goal in
Didn't
Game
forecheck.
7
He
in
didn't
the
forecheck.
playoffs
Oh, geez.
versus the Calgary Flames. Flames. That actually. Thanks. Thanks.
Calgary.
Yeah, the Calgary Flames.
Yes.
That actually ended the dynasty for the Edmonton Oilers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. But it was a dynasty.
Number
Yes.
1.
Yes.
Number 1.
Bill Buckner.
Buckner.
Roy, thank you. I'm going to have to ask you to sit in the penalty
I
box
refuse
now.
deserves
to.
it.
No,
He deserves
I
it.
refuse to.
No, but
How-
you
how-
Punch me in the
how-
stomach
what-
with that one.
How-
Can't refuse to.
how?
You can't refuse to.
No one's heard of 2 of your top 5 scapegoats.
But those are some of the biggest. Like
Steve
that's
Bartman was right there.
Steve Smith. That was the biggest. That ended the dynasty.
Bartman!
That ended the
Roy,
dynasty.
penalty box.
Okay, I'm out of here. See.
Number 1, though.
Time
No, we
now.
did number 1.
We
Bill
did
Buckner.
number 1. Bill
was
Buckner.
memorable.
You go sit with him too.
What about
Bill-
Daryl Bevel would like a word?
No, come on.
He's the one who
So
called
would
the pass
Nick
play.
Anderson.
He called the pass play for the Seahawks in that Super Bowl.
Get out.
Go sit with him.
Jesus, where's Norwood?
Time now for Tony's top 19 quarterbacks
Holy bleep.
in the NFL. Number 19, Tony.
We've never
Number
done
19,
this. Yeah, go ahead.
Geno Smith.
Yeah, wow.
That's pretty low. Number 18.
It's a good list, Dano.
He was a Pro Bowler this year, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
not
come back
so
player
So
of the
was
year.
Tyler Huntley.
It's also my list, though.
Number 18.
Justin Fields,
17.
Jared Goff,
16.
Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson. On what evidence?
That he's the 16th best quarterback in the league.
It's his list.
It's my
Like
list.
this season?
Yeah.
This past season,
Yeah.
I mean, lucky to be in the top
Above
30. This
Geno Smith?
My
Your
list.
It
Keep
is
going.
his list. That's an ultimate argument
Golf.
ender.
I mean,
Number 15,
Daniel Jones.
Danny Dimes.
14,
Derek Carr.
Ah, there he
The
is.
namesake of this list. Top 19.
number 13,
Tua.
12,
Trevor Lawrence.
11,
Kirk Cousins.
10,
Dak Prescott.
We were just trying to establish where Carr was. I don't know if you have to go all the way through with it.
Well,
Feel free to do so.
I don't
mean,
want to go through
right.
with it after Russell Wilson was number 16 ahead of
Prescott
Geno
far too high
Smith.
as well.
Number 9,
Aaron Rodgers.
number 8.
Kyler Murray.
That's really high.
Did you watch football this season?
Number
It's not, by
well,
the
he
way,
knows
it's,
every player on the Eagles secondary.
it's
so
not this
go with
season.
yes.
I'm talking about in its totality right now.
Who would
Derek
you
Carr
want?
is a
Who would you
14th.
want?
Yes. We did this, you and I, we did this in the break room one time, in the commissary, as Dan likes to call it. And you would agree Russell Wilson was in the 16th range, would you not?
Not after what we just saw.
number 7.
Number 7, Tom Brady. You never know, Dano.
Attaboy.
The ink's not dry yet.
We do know.
Number 6,
Lamar Jackson.
5.
Justin Herbert.
That's pretty high. 4,
Joe Burrow.
3,
Jalen Hurts.
2,
Josh Allen.
and number 1.
Patrick Mahomes. The whole point was to say that he was a top 14 quarterback in the league, and I think I made that case.
You'd rather have Carr than Justin Fields?
Depends what kind of offense I'm running.
No, would the Jets rather have Derek Carr than Justin
But what if
Fields?
Justin Fields was on the Jets, though?
I wanted to ask you guys
I don't like
something.
the list.
As Jonathan Gannon, they took a long time, the Cardinals did, to hire a coach. It didn't seem like Sean Payton wanted any part of that. And I saw reporting that basically said at every turn, no coach wants to work with Kyler Murray. And I saw versions of putting up with Kyler Murray's shit. Whatever that is, I don't know what it means. I would think that any coach would want to refurbish that. I would think that most coaches are going to jobs where there aren't good quarterbacks or there are quarterbacks that need refurbishing. That's why those jobs are open generally. The jobs with the good quarterbacks don't come open because Mike McCarthy could sit next to Aaron Rodgers for 15 years and have job security, winning only one Super Bowl because you're guaranteed to win 10 to 12 games a year. But what do you make of increased reporting combined with it seeming like the Cardinals' job wasn't an attractive one to people when we saw how good Kyler Murray was a year ago? It wasn't that long ago that the Arizona Cardinals had the best road record in the league over a 2-year span where they were going 11-2 on the road because they had Kyler Murray. What the hell happened there that fast where the GM gets blown out after an extension, the coach gets blown out after being given an extension, and a team that I believe started the season before last 10-1
Yeah.
just completely falls apart, and now people are saying that the quarterback is somebody that coaches don't want to work with.
Well, it's not just people. It's the Cardinals organization trying to put a ridiculous clause in his contract telling you they don't think the guy works hard enough because he's playing video games.
But he didn't
And
have
so
that.
you have some coaches who are hesitant to go. If his own team is saying that about Kyler Murray, and you have no history with him, you don't know anything about him, the team saying that, it makes you pause a little bit, but it seems to me it just wasn't a job for Sean Payton because he knew he had other options. Jonathan Gannon seems happy to be his head
But
coach.
it took a minute, though. They got rid of their coach faster than most. They had
They
that
did.
opening longer than most. They
Yes.
could have gotten anybody that they wanted, and the people who are reporting around this stuff are saying that it took longer because of what it is that I'm telling you. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if it's fair. I do know that the Cardinals created more problems than they need as an organization by allowing it to be leaked that he had this reputation, so that Stugotz, who has done exactly zero Cardinals reporting, now has only the information of Kyler Murray plays too many video games. He doesn't care about football enough.
Right. That's coming from his own team. That's my point. Like, if they're going to say that, then it would certainly make me pause if I'm going to go B, because the quarterback position is everything. It's why Andy Reid probably is not getting enough credit for being a great coach. He has Patrick Mahomes. That quarterback position is so important.
That's the enemy's problem, though, not Reid's.
That's why
I know, but if his own team is saying, hey, he doesn't work very hard, why would a coach want to come in and attach himself to that?
That's why if you put a homework clause in a guy's contract and it gets leaked, it's incredibly insidious to that person's reputation. It's something that if you only know a few things about Kyler Murray, you know that, and it's a stain on his reputation as long as he's in the league. He's also coming off of an ACL injury to start next season. The team obviously is in disarray because of the front office's mismanagement the last year. I could see why it wouldn't be an attractive job for those reasons. And there was a lot of weird Sean Payton stuff where he had to clarify that he didn't hate Kyler Murray, which is like a weird thing to have to clarify if you actually don't like someone. It's like very bizarre. So I don't know. I don't know why it took long. They ended up hiring someone who was in the Super Bowl. So if that was the target that they wanted and the person they wanted to hire, they weren't going to announce that or put that out there until after he was available to get hired. And the Eagles obviously making a late run in the playoffs in a Super Bowl run could be the reason why it took so long to fill that position.
I think the guy they wanted was Sean Payton. Sean Payton didn't want that job for whatever reason, and so then they decided as an organization, we're going to wait for one of these guys in the Super Bowl, I think.
Do we not think that even if this contract clause hadn't been leaked, that it wouldn't be a known thing within the coaching community that maybe Kyler Murray doesn't work hard, that this wouldn't have gone around anyway, that Jonathan Gannon or Sean Payton or other coaches wouldn't have done their due diligence and asked Cliff Kingsbury or other Arizona assistants, hey, tell me about Kyler Murray, and somebody would have gone, maybe he doesn't work that hard, maybe he doesn't get along with team. Like, that, I imagine this particular criticism is not...
If that's all true, like, we don't really know the truth of
Correct.
what is going on there.
I mean, we know that there is a contract clause, but I imagine that if it's being reported, that it doesn't just stem from the clause leaking in his contract. It actually is actual conversations that coaching candidates have had with former Arizona staff members.
This is why it's so insidious, though, because you can then guess that. You can assume that that's happening behind the scenes, and we don't know if that's happening behind the scenes. But once you put that little kernel of homework clause out into the public,
makes you think.
Everyone stops and thinks, well, there must be something going on
in
behind
my
the scenes.
experience, though, a quarterback who doesn't work hard, who's young, doesn't go 10-1 and look like Kyler Murray did before this stuff started coming out around. That's Ryan Leaf territory of guy can never play. Guy is throwing interceptions because he never looks good on a football field. If you'd asked me,
you have some evidence here.
20 games ago, would Kyler Murray's future be something any head coach would want? 20 games ago, I'm thinking most head coaches would want his prime. It makes me wonder, what else is here? What else is it that we don't know about? And I can't explain to the audience what a gross level of mismanagement it is to sign your general manager and your coach to extensions and then have them have their star employee wounded the way that he was or must have been by the contract clause that told the world this guy doesn't care.
He did agree to it. I mean, it's partly on Kyler Murray and his agent for agreeing to that ridiculous clause. He signed that contract.
You can agree to it without expecting the public at large to know it.
He's also the player in the situation. He doesn't have as much power as the ownership group does that is presenting him that contract. Like when you are signing an employment contract, like Stugotz, you know this, sometimes you have to give and take. If the give is, all right, fine, I'll sign this stupid clause, but I'm going to get this out of it. That's a compromise you have to make sometimes when you're signing a complex document like that.
It's a damaging clause, though, to himself.
Yeah, but maybe it was worth something else that he wanted from them. I don't know. I obviously don't know the details of what else they agreed to. But in this leaking months ago when it leaked only serves to damage the organization. Because even if you don't like Kyler Murray as a quarterback, this is something now that's a stand on his reputation. If you ever want to trade him or get, the best performance out of him if he does stay on your team, which,
Or Sean Payton doesn't want your job.
or
Right.
you can't hire the
Right.
coach that you want to hire. It only hurts you. So it's really just an organization, like a mismanaged organization by all accounts throughout this entire season.
There's a lot of quarterbacks gaming out here. I'm looking right now at Joe Burrow talking about playing Star Wars Battlefront 2 a lot. Tyreek Hill constantly. I know the quarterback position is different, but Joe Burrow, this is a weird one because I don't know. I think a lot of these guys are playing video games, and it's just weird that we're focusing on Kyler Murray for some reason. I know people would always tweet out his record whenever there's like.
The organization is though, Chris. Like Joe Burrow, yes, he plays a lot of video games, but the Bengals don't have to stipulate in his contract, hey, work hard during the season.
It's more about winning because Joe Burrow's been winning. It's just it's more. I just think a lot of guys are probably playing video games and I don't know. It's just this is a weird one.
It was reported that Anthony Edwards, when greeting a new teammate into Minnesota, the first question that he asked him was, "What's your Call of Duty gamer tag?" That was the first question. It's a very pervasive thing, I would have to imagine.
I wonder, as Sean Payton gets whatever it is that it's reported that he's getting, $20 million a year, when it is guys of that age will age out culturally on Juju Smith-Schuster won't get off TikTok, or Antonio Brown is addicted to social media, or generational gulf with player X. What do you mean my quarterback is playing video games? That's not how Joe Montana would have done it. That's not how the Manning brothers would have done it.
It's a funny visual of Joe Montana playing video games, though.
ColecoVision.
How do we know he wasn't? I mean, little Atari.
Pong.
RBI baseball.